guys, we're just minutes away from kicking off the first international interdisciplinary conference of Statu Nascendi is about to begin in about basically an hour and a half. So we're just waiting for the rest of the participants. And yes, best regards from Sofia, Bulgaria. Oh, Stavros! Oh, I'm just recording the movie.
Yeah.
Just follow me.
Yeah.
Follow me. Follow the green signs.
How are you?
Yeah, good. How's the flight from Cyprus?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. I came yesterday.
That's good. How long are you staying for?
I tried to find you.
Yeah, well, I know.
Yeah. Where is my team room?
Well, follow the green signs.
Okay.
Just so everyone else can find it, because it's not easy to find it, to be honest. So here we are, just on time.
Yeah, exactly.
How is your presentation?
Okay, I think it's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
What about yours?
Yeah, presentation-wise, my presentation will be. It will be tomorrow. I will just have some open.
This one hour postponed.
Yes.
From 12:30.
Yeah, I've changed the plan because of some changes, but it's just a minor one. So everyone was informed. So
How's your son?
growing, little by little growing. So yes, here it is. I need to pick up these things, and we are set to go. Okay. Will you pick it up? Thank you. Another green sign. And we are heading there. Dobre jutro. And here we are. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. On behalf of International Relations Daily and in Statu Nascendi, Journal of Political Philosophy and International Relations, I would like to welcome you in Sofia. Thanks to the rector of this university and dean of philosophy department, as well as many professors from this university. We have the pleasure of hosting so many scholars from all over the world. From Kosovo, from Finland, from Cyprus, from Greece, from Poland. I'm from Poland as well. From Bulgaria, of course, and many other scholars who will attend the second day of this conference. We are a new entity. As a non-profit organization, we were organized in 2017. We started as 2-people organization. Now we are growing to more than 65 people. So far, I don't know if I left the journal somewhere. Are you there? Oh yes. So let me show them to the zero. Sorry, it's okay. So basically, that's what we do. We publish 2 volumes per year. That was our first volume. It was published in 2018, at the end of 2018. The second volume has been published quite recently in April 2019. The third one will be published soon, I suppose in November, and the following ones in April and November of 2020. If we were about to use the sport metaphor, I'd say that we are accelerating like Usain Bolt, because we are starting to attract more scholars to publish with us, because in 2017 we had just, I suppose, 20 paper submissions. In 2018 it was 45, and in 2019 we had to select from over 145 papers already. So that is a massive achievement of all of the people who work for us. Thanks to the basically hard work and dedication of our scholars. Evangelist, for instance, who is from Greece, and currently he's studying at University of Sorbonne. Thanks to Stavros from Cyprus, who is studying with me here at Sofia University. Thanks to Christiana Stoyanova, who has just graduated from Natolin University in Warsaw, and thanks to Francesco Trupia, who couldn't make it today because of his PhD. He basically submitted his PhD and he has been very busy recently. Thanks to these people, and also of course Marcin Grabowski from Jagiellonian University. We've attracted quite a lot of scholars these days, and we can be found online, of course. We are published by Columbia University Press as well as Ibid and Verlag. Thanks to these guys, we exist on the market. Thanks to Valerie and Christopher from Ibid and Verlag, we were given a chance to start publishing, and we don't want to stop. Our scholars basically are very productive. Some of them publish 3-4 papers per volume. We don't only publish, we help all other scholars to improve their work, and together we can achieve great things, I suppose. So I don't want to extend that unnecessarily, but I also want to thank one gentleman from Sofia University especially, Professor Dafov, who has helped me a lot to achieve what has been achieved in this particular instance. Also, I want to thank Professor Gangov, Professor Dimitrova, and many other scholars from university. And the most important person I want to thank is my wife, who is patient enough to do not divorce me yet. No, I'm just kidding, but my wife is a very patient person, and she recently gave birth. So, without any further ado, I would like to present
Galina Rajkova from Sofia University.
Who presents paper on Hegel's Recollection and Imagination. It's one of the best pieces of commentary on Hegel's Recollection I've read. Much better than mine, much more sophisticated, much more developed, and I would love to ask thousands of questions after this presentation. So just thousands. And good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
I thank you. My pleasure and my honor. Okay, now, thank you for being patient with this first with the technology. The reason is I don't have many slides, there's just a few slides there, but I really insisted on showing them because my husband prepared them for me. So I had to honor his effort. Thank you very much for your patience again. Now, the title of my paper is Hegel's Recollection and Imagination. So this topic is very interesting and I'm very passionate about it because I have other work apart from being a PhD student in philosophy. And this work is mainly psychological. I'm a psychologist and I do past life regression sessions. And the only question I always, every time get is, did I just imagine this or I remembered it? So, recollection and imagination are very much connected topics, and I always say, well, to my patients, to my clients, I always say, well, it's actually the same. And now I'll try to show you why I think it's very connected, it's almost the same. Okay. Now, I'm showing you this because it shows the formation of the concepts connected in a very artistic way with the topic I'm going to speak about. So, Hegel's phenomenology, for me, could be compared to a dormant volcano. One can feel the lava of intuitive power raging beneath the crust of reason. And I'm using this poetic language because the paper is an imagination, and I think it is appropriate to have a bit of figurative speech. Hegel's personal fight is to tame his wild imagination and to succumb it to the concept. To cite Veren here, Hegel's own contrast is between Vorstellung and the grief, which is imagination, well, roughly translated, and concept. I think this is not meant as a conflict. This shouldn't be meant as a conflict. It is simultaneously a master-slave and a lover's relationship between two sides of one dual entity, which are as necessary as destructive to each other. Wherein, in fact, could be blamed for, in brackets, over-exaggerating the role of image on the account of the concept, and he is aware of that. In fact, in the phenomenology, the image is as important as the concept. But how imagination relates to recollection? Let's see. In order to deduct Hegel's notion of recollection as it appears in the phenomenology, we must start from his notion of time, or rather, shall I say, motion of time. In the last poetic paragraph of his phenomenology, Hegel frequently and exclusively uses the term Erinnerung as one word, but also 3 times in 2 different ways as one word and with a separation, Erinnerung. So why does he do that? Why does he use the same word in 2 different ways? Koji says with regard to this subject that in his opinion, Erinnerung, that is the internalization of the objective real. And Erinnerung is one word, that is remembrance. So this is his short statement, and I think he's quite right, but let's see why. Verin, however, chooses to translate both variations as recollection, with one word, and considers it the master key to phenomenology. My impression is that by recollection, Verin actually means namely this kind of Erinnerung which is written separately, which Hegel has also written separately. According to him, it is juxtaposed to alienation, which is in German Entäußerung, because Entäußerung means going out, and Erinnerung means going in. By this, Verin implies the alienation which happens to the spirit when it is conceptualizing nature, and only then, which I don't think is quite true. Alienation follows in Hegel on every stage of knowledge. Alienation of nature is given is followed by alienation of this alienation as history in time, and so on. Excuse me. That's much better. With regard to the connection between imagination and recollection, Verin concludes that recollection proceeds through metaphors, ingenuities, and images. He elaborates on the several major metaphors serving as keys in Hegel's theory, the beautiful soul, the unhappy consciousness, as we all know, and the famous master-slave relationship, among others, and especially the inverted world, which I think he missed to realize that Hegel has borrowed from an earlier writer, von Grimmelshausen, who in 1967 had the same piece of work with the same name, Die verkehrte Welt. Generally, metaphor as a figure of thought and speech, as we all know, occupies a very honorable position in Hegel's phenomenology of spirit. Verin demonstrates a strong intuition in understanding Hegel's metaphoric toolbox, as well as the concepts encoded in them. To cite his own words, philosophy and literature seen in this way are 2 sides of a coin. Neither can be fully separated from the other. End of citation. His work, Hegel's Recollection, Verin's work, Hegel's Recollection, is a beautiful demonstration of such unity. But is imagination actually the same as Hegel's Recollection? Let's first look into Hegel's Recollection. The becoming of spirit has 2 sides, 2 directions, or better said, 2 parallel paths. One is the spirit's becoming itself, which is in Hegel's Geistes zum Geist, which forms or is formed by the role of contingent events. This is the process of Entäußerung, alienation of the finite nature. To know limits is to know sacrifice. It is a bearing of the cross towards Calvary. Schädelstätte in German, which literally means a place full of skulls. Nature represents sacrifice and constant alienation. Ewige Entäußerung, as Hegel says. Spirit is contingency as space and time in nature as conceptualized by man. History and the Conscious and mediated history is the conscious and mediated becoming of the spirit, which is alienated in time, and history becomes double negation from nature. Man first aims to know nature and then to know himself. History is therefore inseparable part of this double nature of spirit. There is no spirit outside of the human history. There is no spirit without man, and man knows himself through history. So philosophy is the self-knowledge of man who aims to become wisdom. Moreover, man can only understand history if it is temporal. Historical time moves slowly. In German, this is called träge Bewegung, like the food in the digestive system. Hegel uses the word verdauen, which is exactly digesting, metaphorically, to illustrate this need for slow motion, but also the element of assimilation. In order for the history to be conceptualized, man needs time to assimilate the food of his own gallery of pictures, I'm citing Hegel here, loaded with the richness of spirit. The movement of time draws a perfect circle comparable to the mythic symbol of the snake biting its tail, which I'll illustrate at the end of this essay. It resembles the path of the spirit itself. I may do it now. Does it show it? Yeah, there you go. Beautiful snake. Starting from the emptiness of the desire for something non-existent or existent in the future, or a dream, time moves toward present by the means of the past. The past, here is the memory, or according to Hegel, Erinnerung, recollection. But Erinnerung, written as one word I will say later, I think is remembrance too, as Kosher says. The goal of this second circle of negation and Äußerung, alienation, is for the spirit to become self-conscious, to know itself as self, or the Sich als Geistwissende Geist, to become knowing himself. In contrast, the first circle of negation was only for the spirit to become spirit, or das Werden des Geistes into Geist. The spirit has grown up physically, one may say, and now is moving toward self-consciousness, toward personality formation. Hegel speaks of formative educational process, and I'm citing formative educational process of the objective reality. The spirit continues that spiral-like motion until the process is complete and education is accomplished. At this point exactly appears philosophy, and precisely this is why Hegel's favorite metaphor was that the owl of Minerva begins its flight only at the coming of dusk. However, Hegel has a second variation of the idea of memory, Erinnerung with a dash, separated. How it differs from Erinnerung written as one word. It may be of interest here to consider the semantic of the prefix when in German it is attached to verbs. There are three aspects of its meaning. First, the act of completing something. Second, the act of transiting from one stage to another. And third, etymologically, it comes from the Old German prefix of ur, which means aus, from, and denotes provenience or inheritance. For example, the word Urerbe, some of you may know it from the Nazi lexic, contains both prefixes and denotes that the first heir, this is the first heir, the one with the highest right of inheritance. By emphasizing heir, Hegel draws the attention in all three directions. So his Erinnerung implies firstly the final stage of spirit's withdrawal into itself, secondly the transition into a new stage, and third the reference to the inheritance from previous stages or preservation. Hence, Erinnerung is the threefold act, while Erinnerung as one word is meant in the rather static sense of remembrance. It is an element of the mechanism of historical time and is translated as recollection usually, but it is remembrance when it is one word. Erinnerung, in my opinion, is recollection when it's written separately. So, recollection is the way by which spirit, by retaining the past, steps into a new level, a higher form of its existence. The realm of spirits, Geisteswelt, is form educated by the tasks which any education usually involves, like memorizing and recollecting. So both memorizing and neglecting. There is also succession, one takes over from another. No need to mention the immense work effort behind history's achievements. So what is the goal of this education? According to Hegel, the goal is the revelation of depth and the expansion, extension, the Ausdehnung in German of spirit. The goal of his imaginary cross of vertical and horizontal expansion is for the spirit to attain self-knowledge. Seine Substanz vollkommen zu wissen is very well said, I like that, and it means to know in full its own substance. The knowledge, one internalized or digested, let's say, belongs to spirit, becomes its own, becomes sein. This process of expansion / digestion is constantly evolving to a higher level with each repetition, but it also moves in circles, forming an endless spiral of spirals. A spirit also follows the circadian rhythm of day and night. Once it has reached the absolute concept, absolute begriff, the spirit is engulfed in the night of its own self. It goes back to its own self, in sich gehen. At this point, the spirit gives its embodiment over to remembrance. Embodiment. Hence, Erinnerung is the sleeping memory of the spirit's dream. When it awakens, thanks to Erinnerung, now the recollection, the reborn spirit, which seems to have forgotten all that has learned before, commences its new day at a higher level. The Erinnerung, written separately, is the awakening memory of the spirit, while the spirit follows its circular journey through the days and nights of its self-knowledge. On one hand, the spirit uses history as contingency toward its goal to attain absolute knowledge of itself as spirit, and on the other hand, it uses the sciences, of which knowledge appears, as Hegel says, erscheinen the Wissen. These two lines of self-knowledge of the spirit together in their effort to coincide create the conceptualized history. The latter is saved in the memory, which is Erinnerung as one word, to be recalled on the next stage, while the precious essence of knowledge is given over to remembrance. The empty shells of the spirits, the Geister, are piling on a mass grave of skulls on this Calvary, this Golgotha, Schädelstätte in German, to secure the throne of the Absolute Spirit and also to keep it company in its infinite solitary journey. Now, I wonder, shall I read about the imagination or just cut here and maybe whoever is interested?
Go on, it's interesting.
Okay. Now, what about imagination? The common ground of all theories of imagination is accounted for by Ricoeur, as well as the note of contradiction between them is the state of confusion. With regard to imagination in discourse, metaphor may be considered the basic ingredient of most forms of imaginary thinking, expressing the dialectical structure of knowledge through the similarity, indifference, and the union of contradiction. I'm citing one of my bibliography, Cleron. The conclusions of Ricoeur with regard to metaphor are very important for our investigation, as they point out to the process of altering of meaning, which is part of the process of concept formation. His concept of metaphor involves much more than just deviation of denomination. Metaphor is a predictive non-pertinence, which is aimed at producing a sort of shock between different semantic fields. A semantic innovation, he calls it, restructuring of the semantic field even. With regard to the individual word, it extends the meaning of the individual word. When through the figure of style a new meaning emerges, imagination commences. Imagination's point is to offer this mediation. How does the metaphor do this? To draw from Aristotle's recommendation, for a good metaphor it must perceive the similar. The similarity has to be placed in an unusual combination between two objects which are situated in distant semantic fields. The distance has to represent logical incompatibility, but combined with certain similarity. At any occasion, the metaphor stretches the synthesizing power of the mind, and the further the better, as long as the similarity connecting the two semantic realms stay intact and unbroken. Why does consciousness and speech produce metaphors, and how do they relate to the process which Hegel named recollection or inner with separation. What are metaphors for? Certainly there is more in the art of producing far-stretched movements of the mind between objects that are precisely and peacefully keeping distance. Metaphor creates the tension in the sense of certainty that pushes consciousness to try to establish a secure point of reference bouncing between the objects and the I. To cite Clearo, it synthesizes the negation with the negated. It solves contradictions, which is the chief aim of dialectics. The Hegelian Erfahrung, or experience, is a double movement of consciousness against the object and from consciousness towards itself as consciousness of its knowledge. Did this get clear? Consciousness against the object, then from consciousness towards itself, and then as consciousness of its own knowledge. This is the moment of doubt, the turning point when Entäußerung is negated and becomes Erinnerung one more time, but on a higher level. So, Entäußerung is alienation, Erinnerung is remembrance. Experience is moving in a circular motion, and while the concept is getting more and more real, moving away from the illusion of the senses, the circle becomes tighter and the meaning more abstract. The formation of the concept is a contraction toward the center of inambiguity, and so, however, the metaphor is the guardian of reality. It tends to question the centrifugal forces of the concept and to force it in a centripetal direction. It pulls the concept towards its periphery, a kind of you loftings push me pull you, as everybody knows probably that animal from Dr. Dolittle. The diagrams try to show this element of grasping that the concept contains. Begriff is no more, Begriff, which is concept in German, is no more than an attempt, never finalized, by the way, to grasp the knowledge of something, whatever. The root of begreifen is greifen, which is to grab. Begreifen means then to grab and hold something, and so the Begriff or the concept grabs and holds the given. Discernment inevitably needs finitude. Discernment inevitably needs finitude. That thing so unreal, as Hegel calls it, that thing so unreal is the inalienable friend of knowledge. The immortal man ceases to know who he is. A frozen concept is a dead concept. Thanks to imagination, the concept stays alive. So there comes the imagination. Once conceived, born and given a name, the concept sets on a journey, just like the spirit, towards a constant, repeated death and resurrection. Metaphors and imagination in all its forms, in contrast to concept formation, feed concepts with life and work toward continuity and resurrection. The contrasting and expanding movements create a pattern of constant pulsation, a rhythm of breathing, which inspires life in language and knowledge. It is a subjective seesaw of a reasoning that goes back and forth, that cuts the given world of perception into digestible pieces. Sagen ist Segen, say the Germans. To say is to cut. One may say as language and reason represent a hin and herübergehende, so soul-like movement between the known and the given, a dynamo which takes knowledge to a higher level. By finding similarity in dissimilar fields, metaphor expands the meaning of each of the words involved and of the whole semantic field. It adds connotations and nuances that suddenly, by shock, force consciousness to realize the deficiency of its concepts, which are shaken and become fluid and flexible once more. Every time a word takes part in a metaphor, it changes the concept more or less dramatically, evolves it towards the absolute Begriff, which is the absolute concept, absolute Begriff. Similar functions exercise all other non-discursive forms of imagination, of course, as dream, fiction, drama, novels, etc. And even the illusions with their ability to stretch the concept and or the mind and sustain their plasticity. All figures of the imagination are mental asana, teaching consciousness of the sacred yoga of everlasting rejuvenation and self-overcoming. The various metaphors and pictures used in this text are meant to demonstrate this in a manner congruent with their purposes. Recollection is not imagination as a conclusion, but it reveals itself through it. The concept formation mimics the movements of spirit. Concepts developed through phases of relative stability and change, stagnation and revolution, and this happens through lack or presence of imagination. Poetry is the teacher of humanity, as Hegel observed. Scientific reason, growing to overconfidence lately, to cite Hegel, only reveals itself to itself. However, is her hypothesis ever possible without the jump of imagination? Imagination can bring life into matter, says Kenosh. Indeed, Hegel's spirit is neither real, as in religion, nor abstract, as in philosophy. It is alive. I think it is alive. Like a living being, its nights are full with the dreamt images, gallery of pictures, he says, of its memory, its inner, and in its days are busy with work of recollection and conceptualizing. Hegel imagined a new mythology of reason. Hegel's own creation myth transpires in the phenomenology of spirit. The master of the world, Weltenmeister, creates the realm of spirits, Geisterreich, while climbing the infinite spiral staircase of ever-evolving cycles of new sameness, conceiving by its own seeds and giving birth to itself through the womb of knowledge, desperately hoping in its infinite loneliness to conceive the absolute knowledge of itself. I finished. Thank you for your attention.
That was great. Great insights into Hegel. Can I just ask a populist philosopher question, basically, or wooden philosopher question? In terms of the Hegel recollection and imagination, these concepts are very interesting, but they are a little bit contradictory. Especially, when we look through the prism, like you mentioned, of Vereen, he misreads certain parts of Hegel. But if we go to Kojève overinterprets them. The Kojevian interpretation of Hegel is slightly reddish, the same like Lucas. But what I'm getting at, how, in your opinion, forget about these great commentators, Vereen, Ricoeur, Lucas, whatever, Williamson, forget about them. How, in your opinion, can you explain the fact that Hegel came to conclusion that the end of history will happen when Napoleon will finish the Battle of Vienna? And in the meantime, he concluded just a few years after that, well, I was actually wrong. So would you explain that through the circle of his constant recollection, or would you explain that through the circle of imagination? Which concept explains it better? Do you get my question?
It is a mistake of Hegel. Yeah, it's observed as a mistake. However, in a certain sense, when did the French Revolution happen? It was around
1792.
Yeah, so I'm very bad with history, but was Napoleon somehow connected to that?
After the French Revolution,
so he had the expectation that, I guess, I think he had the expectation Napoleon to be spreading and to be making a new world with the new concepts of the French Revolution. And in some way, I think he might have been actually right. But from the point of view of no time.
No time.
Yeah, because for us, history, yes, it is spread in time. But the end of history will be, is just is not as soon as we expect it to be reading Hegel. Because the French Revolution is the beginning of a change that actually leads to that, in my opinion. Indeed.
So finitude in Hegel, the concept of finitude is not actually like something which will keep finish and it will keep circulating, it will keep self-developing, self-improving. It will be Statu Nascendi, the process of creation.
Yeah, so you're asking how is going to evolve, how the spirit is going to evolve after the end of history then? Is that the question?
No,
I asked
it
myself.
was the question because then Hegel was saying that the crucial, the Germany, it's the new embodiment of the great embodiment of the spirit. But then he was wrong again, and then
We're not sure if he was wrong. What I'm saying is, if you observe from a higher point of view, that still may happen.
yes, surely.
That still may happen.
I'm just wondering
He
when.
might be wrong, he might be right, not really wrong at the end. But reading him and probably our concept of time is such that we have taken this signs, this points in the history literally. But they may be just beginning of a process, and we'll see that in the
So that's
future.
Fukuyama
The future is yet
argument,
to
basically.
show
Fukuyama
it.
the argument who was accused of being wrong when he was actually
No, it's,
being
I think it's
metaphorical.
quite literal. It's quite literal reading of Hegel. There must be more to that, and I think this is a question of further investigation and maybe some more papers about that. Because he just underlines the importance of the French Revolution, which I agree with. It's really a turning point that is no going back from there. And then he points out the end of the arts as well. And I think we can see this already
And
happen.
poetry as well.
Yeah.
Art and poetry, I think.
No, I don't think but the arts.
Arts.
Poetry is going to be there, I suppose, because it needs to give food to the development of the spirit. But arts, as we know them, they're not going to be there, and we can see that already happening. So he was a great visionary. I think he is like a figure coming from the future, going back.
So was he great because of his imaginary potential or because of his insights, his emphasis on recollection?
Well, as I said, both, because you cannot have one without the other.
And
sometimes you can.
Perfect explanation.
You can
that's the
remember.
explanation I was searching for.
Yeah, what I said is that he might have just remembered the future.
That's
Not
a very,
much.
very, very sly explanation.
Yeah, and in the same way we imagine the past. We don't know what the past really is.
That's great.
So it's.
I think we'll continue this conversation in the years and decades to come.
So bear in mind, imagination and recollection is very confusing. They're not the same, but almost.
In that respect, I would like to invite to podium Mrs. Ilma Imeri from University of Jakova. Is that right? I'm sorry for pronunciation. Please step into the podium and we are all ears.
Hello everyone, my name is Ilka Imeri from Jakova, University of Jakova. I teaching Albanian language subject. I prepared this subject with Professor Labinot Berisha, but I presentation. The paper with the title The Art of Speaking. The art of speaking in the media manifests itself in a seminar prepared by journalists and interpreted by moderated journalists. In Kosovo, we do have a paper study of the art of speech in the media. In this paper, we will address the speak language in some of the most popular TV programs in Kosovo. Research corpus has screenplay was a program in Klan Kosovo moderated by Enur Pakashtica, Elite Show on TV Dugagini by Elita Rude, in How to Cook by Coavision moderated by Linda. The script of the propers have been transcribed. We have looked of similarities and we have compared the writing and the speech. This paper is theoretically based and sought to explain the discourse and similarity between written and speak language. The work also discarded other authors. In our work, we have paid particular attention on the moderated interpreters, the senior. The moderated in their work do not use the script written in standard Albanian, especially the first two, while the third moderator is more careful when interpreting the paper's script. The art of speaking can be regarded as a linguistic culture, so the interpreters of discourse integrate import to the public. The purpose of this paper is to highlight speech in front of the television screens. In this paper, we have selected 3 TV programs from different TV channels. The second TV program are entertaining, informing the world, entertainment, while the third program is about cooking. The discourses between the 3 programs is different. The speech in the moderator is different from another. The Albanian language searched in standardization in 1972 according Ismaili. Therefore, the standardization of this language is suggested to be used in public spaces. But in recent years, an Albanian standard has been ignored. In the Kosovo media, some journalists do not use informal speech but use formal or non-standard Albanian speech. This action does not belong to simply to speech, but of the range of language, because informal speech belongs to only on linguistic variety via the informal barrier of moderation. During our research to use or non-standard, in the WhatsApp program in Klan Kosovo, moderated by Enur Pakashtica, various and follows in 3 columns. The program of WhatsApp in Klan Kosovo has a language we have chosen in program for the purpose of using bilingualism to make it understandable to readers. The vocabulary used in this show sent used to save the words of a video, but it does not use to the art of beautiful expansions. The another program we have chosen as a case study for the art of speaking beautiful is Elite Show on TV Dugagine with Elita Rude. The moderator of this program does not speak standard Albanian. The some case is repeated in this study as in the study of these shoes. The use of incorrect word is following in 3 columns. The moderator in question used spam and words that are not welcomed in front of television screens, bre, obre, bash, etc. During this show, moderator Rude constantly using words of formal discourse. In all its programs, Rude does not attach importance to standard speech. The third program we have selected is Linda's program, which has information on how to cook. Moderator Linda uses a standard speak word is accepted by audience. Use standard Albanian with all the paper sheets. The research shows that some media in Kosovo do not have language code, and the lack of this code lands use the language barriers. The use of formal speech can be used in family, with friends, with the art of speaking beautiful or informal speaking should be practiced in public, such as the media, various institutions. In Kosovo, regarding the art of speaking beautiful in the media, most of the new television channels today are practicing formal speech. From this research, we find in the first 2 programs various Kosovo channels such as WhatsApp in Klan Kosovo and Elita Show TV Dugagini. They use non-standard Albanian moderators during the moderation. in the program How to Cook with Linda in Clan Cohavision, the moderator of this program speaks standard Albanian formal speaking. As a result of this paper, we see that Albanian speakers encounter with linguistic varieties. Conclusion: the art of speaking beautiful means the connect of language codes that lends use to a successful conclusion. The conclusion of use research programs, the art of speaking, to some media in Kosovo does not discuss language codes and the speech of moderator without language roles variants to be discussed. Generally speaking, standard Albania should be more practices because each language has its own understandable standard. The tendency used on successful language and subject make discussion of standard Albania make or ideology and buffet. This was a paper that we have prepared to present in from you. Thank you.
Okay.
Any question?
I think I'll have one question about
Okay.
art of speaking.
I not understand very good, but
Definitely. Well, basically, I'm interested in the art of speaking. And what would you say what would you recommend to improve the participants' basically way of presenting the material? How would you? What would you suggest? Is the gesticulation important, or is your tone of your voice important, or what's your intake on that?
okay, for my important because in Kosovo not speak very good standard Albanian, but is practicing dialect, and I think so very important for me and for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? There is one more question.
I have also a similar question, but not a question, just a discussion. What about body language in this situation? What about if someone is not familiar or fluent in a specific language? Are there any methodology to make him feel better during the conversation?
Помните translate? Юшам.
Nëse dikush nuk e din gjuhën, çka mund të dalësh me një për shembull gjuha e trupit ose diçka tjetër, me mimik ose tonacione ose diçka që mund të ndihmojë me kuptu.
Që mund të ndihmojë. Okay. This is my author. Okay. And
Maybe
We are discussing here. The problem is that we think that this publication, this study, we tried only to show some problems that we have with dialect, not with other things. Only because the dialect, the people are still using the old language, and so we are trying. To present only this problems, dialect problems.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I invite our colleague from Kosovo to present her presentation, and I believe that you represent University of
Jakova.
Also Jakova, okay?
Because it has been, when it's written University of Pristina, I'm PhD candidate at University of Pristina.
Oh, all right, okay.
And I'm teaching as assistant at University of
Okay,
Jakova.
we will definitely correct it. I'm sorry for the mistake on behalf of the organization, but I thought that you will present
Thanks so
that
much.
despite of the confusion.
Hello everybody, I'm Sanda Bushola from Kosovo. I'm a teaching assistant at University of Jakova of Albanian literature. My paper for you today is talking about literature as a modern art. I hope you will enjoy it. The modern notion has emerged since the beginning of the new epoch related to the new thought and concept of this time. On top of this, the modern notion proclaimed its creative conception of beginning of the 20th century, and its characteristic emphasis is on creative individuality, the presence of subjectivization in literary writing, and the emergence of a new sensibility. This can be called a reaction to romantic, realistic, and naturalistic teachings. Modernization emphasizes the properties of phenomena that are contemporary, transcend tradition, and bring innovation in line with the demands of time. It does not appear in sporadic ways in all countries due to different developments, tradition, and literary change in these countries. Literature, as well as modern art, emphasizes the features of contemporary phenomena that transcend tradition by bringing innovation. Always trying to unite the spirit with the demands of the time. These are always achieved through the search of new artistic tools, new forms, and structures as well. However, depending the country in which it appears and the circumstances in which it develops, literature as a modern art will receive various elements and different features, but also domination. Following the principle of breaking the previous rules, this modern art tends to create new rules, overtaking the previous ones. So it does not imitate, because it aims for perfection through creation. Although this literature appears at different times, depending on the country, some of the representative world authors are Apollinaire, Verlaine, Rimbaud, Mayakovsky, Lorca, Chekhov, etc. However, if we ask what makes a modern work, we would face some dilemmas. Many works are written in a modern spirit, but have no value compared to works belonging to earlier periods of literary creation. That is why many of them have been forgotten in time, leaving no trace. Many of the poems or prose of some modern creators cannot be compared in terms of artistic values with the poems of the Romantic Victor Hugo, with much less those of the great Charles Baudelaire, or the English author Dorothy Richardson, famous novel Pilgrimage, cannot be compared to artistic values that are not modern day Ernest Hemingway's novels, for whom the bells or the Adios a las armas. So we can conclude that the manuscript is modern if it is valid, only if it contains creative energy and artistic wealth. And in Albanian literature comes with the death of Naim Proshi and the birth of Lazgush Poradeci. However, the first to give a definition of this period is Echrem Çağbey in 1929. This literature also comes with two basic characteristics: the creation of new literary forms and structures, and the creation of literary awareness. Therefore, representative authors will try to convey these ideas and principles in their writing. In cultural, historical, and structural terms, modern Albanian literature begins at the end of the last century with Konica, when a model of critical writing appears different from the other one, and develops into Lazgush Poradeci's poetry looking for new forms, a new poetic language, and the aesthetic effect of literature, which builds in depth the identity of the Albanian spirit world. Thus, we can say that modern Albanian literature is a post-Renaissance literary period that is crowned with Naim Proshi literature. Empowering the differences with the previous period, this modern art emphasizes its features more and more. The initiator of this period in Albanian literature is Fai Konica. In his magazine Albanian, he published the authors of this period, commenting on his magazine. According to the scholar Hamiti, Konica, through his insights, concluded that the new literature has succeeded releasing him from the position of the national ideology of Romanticism. This literature articulates the distinction between patriotic action and aesthetic literary creation. Therefore, modern Albanian literature in the beginning expresses the demand to create literature as a separate value, regardless of its purpose. Thus, this literature acquires two main characteristics: the creation of new literature forms and structures, and the creation of literary awareness that literature is distinctly aesthetic creation regardless of its goals. Substantial change was also observed in the literary forms that the authors cultivated. Uniform poetry was no longer written, but new forms of poetry were created with new forms and verses, not being published as book of poetry compilation based on the thematic content, the basic of the poetic structure. Among the changes, however, comes the space that the prose occupied, along with the poetry it had up to this period. Taking modern storytelling forms, we will say farewell to the didactic prose of that time. Characterized by the psychological depth and creative complexity, these authors' prose take on a modern character and bring innovation to literary criticism. At the same time, dramatic genre is not left out, as it experiences a switch from patriotic themes to socio-philosophical themes. Finally, we can say that the first element of literature as a modern art is the awareness of individual creation, whether articulated in literary or critical works. And so, modern literature, which returns to techno-civilized modernity, becomes the literature of new ideas, images, and sensibilities, all expressed through largely new creative techniques, becoming literature of great expressive power. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions about literature, this aspect of literature in the Albanian and Kosovan literature? If not, I have a question, if I may.
You're welcome.
I'm a fan of Russian literature. Are you influenced by Russian authors as well in this part of the Balkans, or are you more influenced by Turkish literature or the literature from the Middle East?
I don't think that we were or we are so influenced by Russian literature. Maybe more the Middle East literature, Turkish or the other countries, because also the history of Kosovo and Albania in general. So I think that it has had impact to our culture and literature also.
That's great. Statu Nascendi is very interested in literature, culture, and we publish at least one paper in each volume on this matter. So I hope to hear from you guys from Kosovo, strong representation from Czechova University. Is that my correct pronunciation? Or
yes.
I'm heading there. So I hope to hear from you guys more often, and I hope that won't be the last participation.
We hope so. We hope so. We will meet again.
We are also waiting for for the conferences in your home.
Yes, you are invited. You're invited.
If you organize anything, just let us know, and
yes.
Statu Nascendi will show up.
It will be our pleasure.
Amazing. Thank you very much. So
it's first time. It's very problematic.
After that, you find the place and no problems.
We find the way now.
But we all learn. We all learn from experience. So
yes,
sir, another question. Another question.
Yes.
Other writers who support the use of the dialect instead of let's call the official or the formal Albanian language that are representatives of the dialect spoken in Kosovo instead of the formal Albanian language.
I'm afraid I'm not hearing so well you.
Yes, if there are writers who support the dialect instead of the use of official or formal Albanian language,
yes.
and or try to fuse a dialect with the official Albanian language, and if we can spot a transition between Albanian and the dialect through literature. The fusion of the language, that is the main point between the official one and the dialect.
Yes, I think I know in many countries there is a standard language and dialect forms who people are using yet. This is also happening in Kosovo. For my personal opinion, dialects are so nice and so good to be used because it's nice for language. We also use the dialects in literature, and when a writer uses the dialect, I think that poetry or prose would be powerful than if it would be written in standard language. I think that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was a very fascinating presentation.
Thanks a lot.
In that respect, I would like to invite to podium our scholar from Finland, Mr. Joel Patamaki, who is a PhD scholar, and he flown all the way from, I suppose, Turku. Helsinki, amazing. And well, we are very grateful that we are here. That's his, as a matter of fact, second appearance at Sofia University. The last year we met here, and thanks God you are here.
Yeah, around here in France.
Great. Podium is yours.
So, my name is Joel Patamaki, and I'm here from Finland, and I do a PhD in University of Jyväskylä in Middle Finland, and I'm not from there. And now I present my paper in this Statu Nascendi conference, partly because it did not go through to Journal of Social Ontology conference. I do social ontology, and which means basically theoretical sociology, and yes, I researched John Searle, who is contemporary American philosopher and who is often being referred as like basic analytical philosopher who takes account the more continental views. For example, famous Lavoisier in his PhD from 80s, which was just recently published by Political Press in English, actually takes John Searle into account in the end of his PhD, which was written in the 80s. So it's basically like the John Searle is the philosopher who that kind of continental, even neo-communists refer to. And so let's start. I will talk about John Searle and Posthuman Speech Act, which means more post-human process ontological, meaning nature and society are not separate, reading of John Searle. And Maurizio Ferraris stretches in his social ontology the contents of collective intentionality in the same way as Kirk or Bratman in contemporary social ontological debate. And the process ontological speech act comes from Gilles Deleuze's social ontology and also Guattari's, and it is well described in introductory book called Deleuze. And then object as tendencies are connected to each other with unstable flows. Because of his emphasis on realism, my study and concentration mostly in defense of introducing alternative accounts on Searle's performative ideas of causality in social ontology. And performative is the basic concept explaining causality in social ontology. In other words, the framework of theory of Ferraris is possible to say that in order to lock the ritual meaning in position, it is necessary to have external gestures. Ferraris defines ritual as external gestures which have internal impact. This is connected to performative theory and textual reading of it, as we will explain. and Ferraris is important. The general framework of theoretical frame of reference that Ferraris sets the written acts, which according to Ferraris speech acts, which means basically also performative is synonym, can only, synonymous concept, only be manifestation and necessary condition for the performative that are in the resistance. As far as I see, the theory of Ferraris, this is essence of theater, and it leads to significant new services of textual factors. Smith's theoretizations of documentary acts rely on communication and increase the pressure to rely on Ferraris when interpreting Serlian deontic forces, which are basically the powers that make the things happen abstractly beyond. And in some ways, that Serre also realized when he put background in theoretical position in his social ontology that make possible of being together, that gives humans possible to benefit from status function, which is same as speech act. Status function is basically speech act, and it's the performative, so it's just different words in different literature, but it's still the same kind of theoretical framework, completely same. And according to Anthony Meyers, the idea of sharing the collective intention is underdeveloped in Serre's social ontology. Meyers claims that for intention to be shared, it is not enough that intentions are coincident. I think that the previous statements, Meyers seems to think that collective intentionality is an individual phenomenon, and these kind of phenomena should be explained by mapping of those intellectual states are shared. On the other hand, if states contains also objects as actors in this network, then the story is very different. The idea is Ferraris about documentality, meaning that the concept of collective intentionality explaining performative is textual in the Derridian sense, meaning it's some kind of written based to interpreting. It's already explained new realist thesis that text is at the origin of social being and nature is different, which is different from post-human, but it can be fixed as I will try to explain. Nevertheless, this is against Serre's ideas because according to him, postmodern thought that gives interpretation endless options to work with those restrictions is not a working explanative model. And realism in general is nearer to post-human thought and is completely postmodern, that there is endless interpretation because also material elements have some kind of role. Serre will attempt to show that the starting points of each event, or I don't know if it could work, can be traced in context of speech act. And if it's not possible, then speech act in question can be included in the category of perlocutory acts, meaning it's acts that have some kind of coincident effect instead of intentional and conventional. The question is partly about controversy concerning classification of speech acts. According to Jacques Derrida, performative have been considered as one category that cannot be broken. On the other hand, Serre has maintained Austin's separation to illocutory and perlocutory acts, meaning illocutory is the one that is conventional and the intention is same as the convention, and perlocutory it has random effects, something just happens. Judith Butler, who has made big work on performatives with Slavoj Zizek on more continental framework or speech act, illustrate that Serre and Austin's contentioners distinction follows, whereas illocutory acts proceed by way of conventions, perlocutory acts proceed by way of consequences, so something just happens. And Butler has been claimed she is not post-human because she still has distinction between nature and society, so it's failed materialism. But this is still important frame of reference when speech acts are taken nearer to post-human thinking. Anyway, maybe the most important thing, because she created the idea of performative underpinnings of identities and feminism. Collective acceptance in it just ends practice as whole. That is implication of Serre's theory. Here we must keep in mind that the thesis of Ferrari is that registrations are a basic building block of social reality. By registration, Ferraris means the same thing as derrida with text. The idea of Ferraris does explain the problems in Searle's theory of collective intentionality. On this view, the collective, and tell me when the time has ended.
Don't worry.
On this view, the collective acceptance only changed the text to different format. There is no entity without history, which is text. In this sense, the end of one acceptance makes the text different at one part, but most likely does preserve some parts of the original text that covers the activities. In this are partly overlapping. On the basis of this social separation, Ferrari tries to separate social and institutional facts from each other, so there is many separation compared to posthuman thought. The institutional role is formalized to very advanced level by third party or through the authority of the institution. The social role and forces, on the other hand, are not codified. They have codified means written in some law or some, not only law, but some explicit text that is different from implicit meaning. It's only like between the lines or something like this. They have appeared spontaneously spurred by situation through many institutional acts, are originally spontaneous and social, but over time they have been codified to institutional act. Ferrari classifies that interaction of registers and communication by making more definition and conceptualization between around registers and Searle. According to Deleuze, applies this kinetics principle to all features of social organization, including the human subject. The formal starting point of their method is multiplicity. A multiplicity is an interdeterminate group defined formally as capacity to be affected prior to the elements that it will consist of. It's from Radar Du's book Deleuze. And the performatives are peace acts, and therefore the performists are the heart of opportunities and possibilities of peace acts. The speech acts affect, therefore, the elements of speech like syllables of charge. Emmanuel Reynolds has made distinction between two types of social ontology. The first of these two ontologies deal with types of entities that compose or constitute the social, ontological being in general, and the other one is the more post-human, process-oriented way of seeing social ontology that he also sees as critical social ontology. And the more process-oriented social ontology always sees things happening through the concept of assemblage, and what authors Deleuze Guattari refer to as an assemblage is stratum that has become decoded, that is one in which the value of coding parameter is low, and when animal behavior stops being determined by genes, or when human behavior ceases to be fully specified by right and norms. So it's way that nature and society fuse in a way there is no more at least determined or completely determined behavior. Then human institutions have a role when the decoding happens. This is when the performative, or in the other words, the speech act starts to have effect. Nature is not nature, but socially categorized behavior is also natural in some sense. There is idea where no coding that comes from one source of nature is post-human. Manuel de Landa states that it is hard to approach study of language from theory of assemblage theory because language works at many levels at the same time. Maurizio Ferraris has claimed documentality is the basic notion in the understanding of causality and the structure of social ontology in general, but not in nature. Main difference between Ferraris and John Searle is that Ferraris wants to replace the activities fallen under intentionality by documentality. Searle's theory was pioneering work in analytical branch of social ontology. Ferraris separates also written and spoken acts. The general framework of theoretical frame of reference has been written act, and in the Searle it's more like spoken acts and different institutions. And according to Ferraris, speaks as and can be only manifestation and necessary condition for the performative are in the registers, and the registers are the written. Okay, so I have analyzed some basic tendencies more in new realist or separation between, and also tried to show some ways that a speech act can be maybe post-human. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask one question?
Yeah, I just want to again say that it's important that Zizek refers to John Sherland's speech act at the end of his first PhD in the 80s because it makes the thing like that the speech act has been post-human from the beginning, even before like Deleuze, but little bit. Yeah, but
How Searle connects to Wittgenstein? Because there is a connection.
Yeah, he is in his book Construction of Social Reality. When he discusses the background, he has three concepts that explain causality in social ontology. I research causality in social ontology in my PhD. The background is the term under he discusses or more criticizes Wittgenstein. They are both ordinary language philosophers. I mean, so they are in the same school of thought. At least later Wittgenstein is with Searle, but Searle is critical. But he anyway as one concept in his social ontology, and also the speech act, of course. But it's not so. So yeah, he relates in critical, collegial way from the same school of thought. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I have noted down some terminology that they are very crucial also in my field of specialization. For example, post-human, exteriority, interiority, objectivity, subjectivity, phenomenology, postmodernism, intentionality. There are some phrases that are very crucial also for my expertise. My question is that you have said that John Searle is an analytic philosopher. What does any integration between John Searle's terminology in ethics or in religious studies that you have figured out through your research, or just its strict ontology?
Religious studies. You mean like cultural studies? Yes, I mean John Searle's social ontology can be seen, or also I try to see it a little bit that way as I think cultural or using behind or beyond some of his concepts kind of cultural studies, methodologies and theories that are methodological.
Okay. Are there any similarities with ethical purposes? For example, does he use Levinasian or Husserlian arguments in order to empower his?
No, he does not use straightly Husserlian, I think, or phenomenological, but he has often been seen implicitly as phenomenologist. So, by, for example, some guy whose family name is Mulligan, there's an argument that he's phenomenologist anyway. But I believe he does not refer straightly to Husserl, at least. At least not much, at least. It's not, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, I suppose that our next presenter is Andrea Regno from London School of Economics. Andrea is not well, unfortunately. He couldn't make it because he's slightly sick. So he recorded a little presentation, but he asked me to basically read out the paper on his behalf.
Hello everyone, Andrea here from London. Unfortunately, I couldn't be in Sofia because of health issues. The weather here has been changing a lot, so I couldn't be there in Sofia, and I really wish everyone to have a fantastic conference. So for I can be able to prepare in time an online presentation, and I was not sure whether I would be feeling well to give a talk. So I asked Piotr to read some chapter of my paper that could be relevant for the conference itself. So I asked him to read obviously the abstract, the introduction, the first chapter. It's called Probability Shapes Information, Shannon's theory, and then I'll ask him to read from the chapter Commons and Comparativism until the end, until the conclusion. I believe it'll take about 10-15 minutes, and I kindly ask Piotr to also share my email in case anyone wants to have a conversation, a debate around these issues that are like presented in my paper, or for any other question or feedback, it would be great, especially because as I'm still like a master's student, receiving feedback is very, very helpful for me. And so I decided to read just this chapter, as I believe they might be really relevant, and because like they take a political stance, might be too strong, but that's what I came up, and basically, as you will hear, is a political stance that tries to be as contemporary as possible, in the sense that tries to see how we can think certain digital technologies within like the complexity of our society, and I propose like another way of how we can convert certain politics into um, into a more contemporary approach, and for doing so I decided to include what other scholars have said, and obviously I also saw some of the limitation. Then again, I don't want to go deeper into this, as you will hear. Then again, that's what I think they're the most important chapters, and what I wanted to present anyway. So you'll hear what I think it's. It's relevant for this conference, and for the public, for the audience. So I want to wish you again a nice conference, and yes, please email me if you have any question or feedback. And thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
So guys, since I'm impersonating another individual, I will wear his badge for the purpose of this presentation. So I'm Andrea for now. If anyone wants to ask a question, for 15 minutes I'm another man. So Andreas Ragnall's paper title is Reinventing Politics and Epistemic Conversion of Information Technologies. And his abstract states that in this paper he will provide a pragmatic interpretation of Shannon's information theory in order to see how many theorists have failed to consider such interpretation and its consequences and potentialities in their accounts of information society. He will finally report several political approaches which aim to define an alternative emancipatory politics. And introduction states that an investigation of the cultural object involves an interplay between different theoretical gestures. Relevant approaches can be drawn from philosophy to media studies, from design to sociology. So it seems that it's quite a broad field. While philosophy can be useful to account the underlying assumptions of given theories, media critique provides a critical archaeology of the techniques used in past and current technologies and their usage in other non-technological fields, for example, management, governance, control. And while designing helps scaling, prioritizing, finding the correct size of a phenomenon and of its theoretical explanation, certain issues are visualizable, manageable, tangible by society, which renders them available in other shapes and nuances for other subjects. All these disciplines aim to provide novel narratives, but none of them should be understood as constitutive of real empirical worlds. Taken individually, they are all parts and fragmentary, yet they can still be useful. These theories or models indeed have a local scope, whether they instantiate a specific and regional case, or they are elaborated within certain cultural or geographical constraints. However, when they are applied to other socio-cultural contexts, questioning how these disciplines apprehend, grasp, and compress a real cultural phenomenon becomes necessary and foundational to all investigation about what they can produce. In other words, understanding their epistemic account and development is necessary to reflect upon new forms of political action. This method of investigation is parallel to the object criticized by several theories below listed. Exploring the cultural dimension of information in the last 30 years means adapting as the object of this investigation to the theme of network society by Kosteladis, published in 1996, and the one of contemptual stack by Bratton, also published in 2006. Therefore, it means focusing on the role of network digital media. Obviously, such inquiry involves questioning the process of financialization, that is, the integral capture of economy by finance, and the claims related to the automatization of physical and digital infrastructure due to the rise of artificial intelligence techniques and technologies, which Evangelist will elaborate on in a minute, I suppose. Nevertheless, exchange of information has been understood as a primitive concept not only in Claude Shannon's information theory in 1948, but also after Second World War in other scientific fields, for example, chemistry, biology, and physics. And in the following chapters, Andrea deliberates on the probability shapes information by looking at it through the perspective of Shannon's theory. Network society, he makes sense out of network society. Then he switches to a computational turn, and that leads him to common and cooperativism, two post-capitalist ruptures. Just to conclude with general intellect sizing the algorithm, so he's deliberating on the seizing of the algorithm, and his conclusion in this respect suggests that this essay started by briefly presenting Shannon's theory, and following Langos' analytics information theory was historically and theoretically contextualized. A jump of roughly 40 years has made in order to account the digital turn and the computational turn along their respective philosophical, sociological, and cultural interpretations, by stressing that algorithms are the main technique to compress, manage, and exchange information. Nowadays, the essay continued questioning the political and epistemic implications of these ubiquitous applications of current technologies. Finally, post-capitalist claims have been made thanks to the alternative understanding of the information theory, it was argued that most of the potentialities of cognitive informational technologies cannot be unleashed under capitalist form of organization. So I suppose that what I suggest is that after the proceedings of this conference, I will send you the full paper, so you can get yourself acquainted with the paper. And Andrea really asked me for some constructive feedback on his paper, so I suppose we can continue the deliberations on this topic in the post-conference debates, because the paper is quite long, and if I read it in full, it would take me 45 minutes. We'll switch to Evangelist's presentation now, and if I can ask everyone to provide us some feedback on this paper, that would be great. On this basis, Evangelist?
Yeah, of course.
Evangelist, before I will invite Evangelist to the podium, I would like to say that these two wouldn't happen without the help of this gentleman, because he attracted not only 2-3 scholars of international reputation, but also he wrote at least 3 papers.
Yeah, two actually.
But you also made a little criticism towards my paper, which is great because it opened my eyes to certain aspects of Kantian philosophy, which I wasn't aware.
Short review.
Definitely. And you can use the keyboard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello everyone. I'm Evangelist Presentation from Sofia University. Currently, I'm an Erasmus visiting scholar in Sorbonne University in Paris. My essay is upon information society in a new form of embodiment. I think that is a perfect match with the presentation of Mr. Yuval and the brief presentation made by Andrea upon Sanon's information theory. We would like to start with some definitions. Information, and this is a colloquial definition, is any amount of data, code, or text that is stored, sent, received, and is manipulated in any medium. Information generally concerns many fields. We have information in physics, mathematics, logic, biology. If we consider, for example, genes that contain a certain amount of information, epistemology, etc. But information is grounded upon 2 basic theoretical assumptions. The one is that the information is extensive, and the other one is that information reduces uncertainty. I'm not going to read the complete definition due to lack of time, but the extensiveness of information mainly refers to the use of sets, data sets or sequences, whilst the reduction of uncertainty has its origin to British empiricism. The Humean analysis of British empiricism, Hume, for example, says that when we have more information, we can be more sure about something. Now, definition of information society. We have a post-industrial regime, post-industrial status in economy, social organization, and economic, of course, so organization. And the basic feature is that we have highly developed information and telecommunication infrastructures that can guarantee, in a way, the sustainability of the system. Here is a table. I stay for a little in order to read it. We have the transition between pre-industrial society, industrial society, and post-industrial society. For example, in pre-industrial society, we have labor-intensive technologies. Human strength was the basic part of the work, not requirements. do not require such long learning skills, and we have a mass exploitation of natural resources. Which in industrial, the machine production tends to capital intensive, the use of machines, of extramolecular energy sources, and a long training qualification, we could say. And in the post-industrial society, high technology information is the main motor engine of the system of production. We have emphasis on the creative aspect of human activity and continuous self-improvement and advanced training throughout life. Let me see. Now as for embodiment, embodiment is a broad concept in everyday uses while when we make something tangible or experienced by human senses, but the philosophical definition, for example, by Varela, Thompson, and Rose, refers more to first having a body with varying sensory-motor capacities, and these sensory-motor capacities are embedded in a more broad context of biology, psychology, and culture. And we have to separate cognition as a system of symbolic information that we interpret in a manner the givens and the symbols of society as a system of symbolic information, and the body cognition that is the capacity of an agent that is beyond the brain body, and that capacity agent plays a significant causal role or a physically constitutive role in that agent's cognitive processing. Now, as for the introduction, the term to the body or the new materialism, we refer to some aspects of term to the body or new materialism. New materialism is a broad concept that encapsulates various philosophical theories from post-structuralism mainly, and the theories that Joel made reference at his talk, but we have the biological body. The biological body is not a mere material entity vs the social, cultural, and political construction of the body. We have technological progress, of course, in neurosciences, in medicine that gave us information about how our bodies function or how we interact with the environment. The rise of some civil movements and struggles, mainly upon excluded bodies, upon minorities or sexual minorities, LGBTQI plus movements, some trends, programs of personal enhancement like specialized diets, like cosmetic surgeries, and finally contemporary post-industrial capitalism seeks for flexible bodies that can work in any place of Earth quickly and in an efficient way. And there is a discrete field that of body studies that can, in a way, approach all these current trends of turn to the body. The structure is upon 5 categories: bodily governance, transforming bodies, virtual bodies, medical bodies, and sexual bodies. I pass it quickly. Bodily governance, some sort introductory theories of classical sociology, the Weberian theory about Protestant ethics. It is about how religious belief shape the bodily identities and behavior of the individuals. In his book, The Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism, Norbert Elias described the etiquette books of Renaissance and onwards, how there were strict rules in courtesy life that were shaping the behavior of the Cartesians. Jeremy Bentham, with his notions of panopticon as a prism that we'll describe, and Michel Foucault with his more broad conception of panopticon in his analysis upon the European penal system. This is the prism that Jeremy Bentham had in his mind and described. The basic feature is that the prisoners are in the center and the guards inspect them from the periphery. So we have center and periphery. Michel Foucault, upon his theories on panopticon, also his notions upon biopower and biopolitics. There are three basic, let's call, works of Michel Foucault that describe what is biopower and biopolitics. Actually, there are practices of the modern state that control and subjugate bodies. We can stay here in order to define what is subject or object. Subject for Foucault. Subject is, for example, me, a human being speaking. But since my speech is investigated by linguistics, for example, that I have to use a certain grammar, that I have to follow certain rules in my spoken language, this becomes quite objectified. So I have to obey to this kind of rules, and this is quite authoritative. So the subject becomes subject-object, and that authoritative and regulatory methods upon me as a subject is a part of biopower and biopolitics. Furthermore, we have control over biology of public hygiene that in a way refers to biopower and biopolitics. Now the post-panopticon model, Bauman was one of the main theorists giving the synoptical model, is while the center can inspect directly the periphery. So if I am, for example, a user on social media, I can inspect VIPs or the elites through their accounts. And we have also a reverse synoptical relationship, that is when the elite can direct the sender, and the sender can inspect the sender directly, and the sender directly the peripheries, something like, yeah, that kind of relationship. And David Lean speaks for liquid surveillance, is the surveillance that becomes more fluid, more liquid. It's a notion adopted by Bauman's theory on liquid modernity, that basically Bauman describes that in pre-industrial world we have heavy machinery that were static, and in post-industrial society everything becomes more fluid, short messages, emails that can diffuse everywhere. And there are some other counter-surveillance applications like Adnusian, that is a revised form of an ad blocker, and the application of gating, I'm getting arrested, mainly used at the Occupy Wall Street movement. Here is info of Adnusian. Actually, when we visit the website, it clicks to all the advertisements and all the links. It creates extra data that can, in a way, trick the tracking records that the insurance companies and banks can receive. And I'm getting arrested is like when someone is getting arrested, sends a direct SMS to his familiars, his lawyer, etc., in order to inform him that is getting arrested. And now for biometric data, we have different kind of biometric data fingerprint, voice and iris recognition. You can read them. It was created and propagated after 1911 and ISIS, and there are some aspects that stem from this kind of biometric data, like notion upon biological and neurological citizenship, that we have to have a complete tracking of our biological, neurological characteristics stored in hard disk, and our health condition, and can be used for new working agents, working scouters, etc. Patients in waiting, the bodies that have become password, how all this data are in a manner a password to access things, and Agaven's theory upon Vios and Zoe. Vios refers to life as being centered to human entities, while Zoe to organisms and forms of life in general. And Agaven says that the dominant today is Zoe, the more broad conception upon life that is in a manner connected to other forms of life or animality, not the human conception. And now as for the transforming bodies, we have a human body, the analysis of Burke, that is in a process of becoming, that our cells are always renew and transform, and Godwin's theory upon body as an active entity, that in a way when the embryo is in the uterus, it can develop with his genetic background, but also as an active agent in the environment of uterus. There is no, not only predetermined genetic sequence, but there is not only the predetermined genetic sequence that can define his activity into the uterus. And now as for organ transplantations, there are some ethical dilemmas, mainly over their use, their distributions, their regulations that the regulations that in a way restrict or permit organ transplantations. If, for example, medicine is an art of healing, or it is a method of preservation of human race by making organ transplantation. Harvey says that we live in an era of primitive accumulation, and he mainly refers to the organ trafficking, so that we are in a way primitive. And now we have the 3D printed organs. We have this picture showing how by the use of fresh cells and growth factors, we can layer by layer create printed organs. There are some ethical assumptions over them, like if, for example, make an organ transplantation that is with a 3D printed organ, it may be an irreversible condition and cannot be replaced by something other. Some dilemmas that arise from the experimental testing of humans of such known biological, let's call materials. The costs are very expensive, and distribution that will be made either many restrictions upon them. Now, as prosthetics, as use of prosthetics, we have many patients think that they have lost conceptual links to their world. They have also problems of authorship, of identifying themselves with the extra leg or the extra hand. Some phantom phenomena, phantom limb, for example, can also appear. This strives from the analysis of Merleau-Ponty and his book, The Phenomenology of Perception, and the distinction between the habitual body and the current body, the body of now, and the body that we're used to have before the mutilation that was the customary, the habitual body. Plastic surgeries now, we have changes, serious changes in our experiential perception. For example, touch, like pressure. It can also be linked with consumerist lifestyle, and if we follow dominant beauty dogmas, dominant beauty ideologies. There are also plastic surgeries for social and political reasons. Some immigrants perform better. Eyelid surgeries in order their characteristics be more compatible with the Western type of eyelids. If we consider, for example, an Asian that has more sharp eyes, the Western that are more round. Virtual bodies now. Here we see a photo of bodies used for virtual reality. We have gradual technological progress by at this VR technologies. First we had the use of VR glasses, then we had the special design gadgets that can in a way take all the form of the body and detect motion, etc. So we have a more embodied experience or a disembodied experience. Some of them, for example, describe that they're leaving their bodies behind where they wear that kind of special design gadgets and immersing virtual environments that they have a perception of a split itself, that the virtual and the biological self, the material self, has in a way split it. And some describe their disembodied experiences as being an astral projection or an astral cowboy. The avatars used in some platforms of social media or some platforms of socialization. Dreamscape was our main platform in our essay that I can send you. We have issues of socialization and identity information through the use of avatars. How do the users select to socialize? How do they perform gestures or smiles, or what type of facial characteristics do they take? And also we have the types of visualization, like here is a picture of avatars, the first person view and the third person view, etc. Now as for medical bodies, we have in a way more human-based approach to medical reasoning. The dominant biomedical model has been accused as a lack of concern when we consider for humanly characteristics like psychology, like our subjective experience of the medicine. Three main models: the one of Engel, the biopsychosocial model, the Rollins-Foss, the infomedical model, and the model of personal relatives describe all this turn to a more human-based approach to medicine. Now, as for disability, disabilities linked with stigmatization. Stigmatization is a form of symbolic interactionism. Disabled people often feel harassed and harassed by the others, and these are the sticky environments that they live in, and also have they do make a huge effort in order to be more close to the average or normative conception of a community, and here is the hidden label. And there is also a critique of the welfare system if the disabled people or the people with special needs make efforts in order to be more close to the normative standards of a community, to the normative, the average person that a healthcare system or a welfare system can promote. Aging, we have mostly social construction of aging or age bodies. Mainly some points, the older working bodies that have to be replaced by newer bodies, by new workers that are healthy, that are strong in order to perform the different works. The effects on the families if elders are a burden or not, and how the welfare and healthcare system manages them. And the promotion of a mode of active aging, that elders are active participants of community, they can participate in diverse happenings of their community, they also can consume, and this is a conception of active aging. Now the use of robotics in the care of elders, mainly chronic diseases like renal failure, dementia. We have to reconsider the role of the caregiver, the care receiver, and the robots. For example, can human-machine interaction can supplement the body experience created by the nurse, or the interaction between the nurse and the patient is an interplay between two living bodies, and thus more profound, whilst the robots can provide only more relational autonomy to the patient. Some dilemmas that arise from the use of robots. And finally, to sexual bodies. This is a panorama of a short panorama of these three first waves of feminism, the classical feminism. We have masculinity vs femininity, and mainly the struggles were around the right of women to vote. The second wave that has a Marxist and critical theory and psychoanalytical background, and the main motto was equality. And after structuralism and post-structuralism, the sexual bodies are approached through language and the forms that can take revealing possible patriarchal narratives by literature, through literature, mythology, mainly by analyzing maternal or feminine archetypes. Judith Butler, the theory of the social construction of gender, that gender is social constructed, that the biological sex cannot serve as a concrete basis for the gender identity, that we all that the sexual body may have biological or material part, but our understanding of the body is always mediated through the pre-structured discourses, through normative claims. And this is the notion of gender performativity. You can read it for a little. Here, Butler analyzes how, by adopting different gender performances, we can, in a way, break the binarity or challenge the natural binary systems like mind-body. For example, C describes that an intersex or hermaphroditic body may follow a kind of deformity that is that's against that pre-structured discourses, and thus we have the breaking of gender-sex duality. Catherine Hayes, by her virtual bodies in cybernetics literature and informatics, also speaks for the breaking of the natural binary systems that are that we have disembodying conceptions of our corporeal physicality. And the main theme of here is that is posthumanism, or the posthuman is a substrate in which information is attached. And so our biological embodiment can only be seen as something happening accidentally in history, not as an inevitability of life. We stay a little more here, we can read it, that it follows a little scheme of pattern randomness that is used for complex systems. And the humans may develop symbiotic relationship with machines or may be replaced. Finally, Donna Haraway, in her Cyborg Manifesto, he describes cyborg mainly as a fusion of organism and machine. There are three discrete moments where this fusion arises, the breaking of the boundary between the human and the animal, the fact that the distinction between the human and the machine has become blurred, and the materiality of the modern microelectronic devices. Here is a definition of cyborg by Donna Haraway as a figuration of both imagination and reality that belongs to a post-human world, and it has no linkage with bisexuality or pre-Oedipal symbiosis or unalienated labor. You can read it for a little. Some theoretical assumptions that stem from all these new theories, the new forms of sexual interaction in cyber environments, our sexual intercourses between humans and robots, or better, non-human entities, how we select to visualize or project ourselves, our virtual selves, and here we have a connection with that flexibility and predictability that we have so many choices that we can make in order to take, for example, an animal form, a woman form, and a gender fluid form in our projection, and the fusion between organism and machine in the post-gender world, and some cyber feminist approaches. I will not read the conclusions. I think that conclusions important. The political impact is mainly given through the description of the forms of bodily governance, the possibilities provided by classical and 3D printed organ transplantation, the use of prosthetic and cosmetic surgeries led us to rethink our bodies as transforming or as being in the process of becoming. Our immersion in virtual environments and the use of avatars race fiction upon embodying and disembodying experience and the formation of our identities in the virtual world. The dominant biomedical model seems to be challenged by more human-based approaches. The use of robotics in the care of people with mobility or mental problems brings dilemmas in the human-machine interaction and the roles of caregiver, care receivers, and robots. And after structuralism and post-structuralism, the natural binary systems have been thoroughly criticized. This fact gave birth of feminist theories which consider the gender first as being socially constructed, but our theory, the body and therefore the gender body as a disembodied process of information, Hale theory, or as a fusion between machine and organism, that was Haraway's theory. Thank you, and I think that I have surpassed the time limits.
Time for two short questions.
Two short questions. It was about half an hour or more. Yeah.
Maybe could you make
Okay, what is alien body? Creating of alien bodies.
Creating of alien bodies. Yeah.
What's
would you-
meant by that?
The creation of alien bodies is mainly the creation of an alien body in a context of a terrorist menace or after the refugee crisis that broke during the past years.
Okay,
And
what's alien?
in order to inspect these alien bodies, we have the mass use of biometric data, like iris recognition, fingerprints, and etc.
What
And
is
also there are kind of excluded bodies, not only alien bodies.
okay, what is your personal attitude toward all that happening?
Toward all that happening, you know, the creation of
Well, yeah, the creation of cyborg bodies and, for example, the cyborg sex. What is your personal attitude?
my personal attitude.
Yeah.
I think that in the post-human or transhuman world, we have to speak more about fusions and not stable conceptions of the self. More fluid conceptions of the self. And this theory, since this theory is briefly analyzed, in a way help us to understand that we are not static entities, we are not mere biological entities, and we are always in a process of reshaping, always in a process of enhancement and possibly augmentation. Yeah. There's some,
I have one more question. For
Yeah,
you.
yeah, of course.
So basically, because I like and the comments. So I'll start
Yeah.
with the comment. I really like the fact that you implemented in your presentation the status of becoming, the
Yeah.
creation, because that's important from the perspective of the journal. And my question to you is, what do you think? Where are we heading to, considering that China, Russia, and USA are basically scrutinizing every move which we make? From the perspective of philosophy.
Yeah. In the perspective of philosophy, that I think has to do more with the new forms of capitalist accumulation in the modern world. That after the crisis that broke, we have a mixture of current trends like the new neoliberal economy and trends that have been known in the past, like the strong superpowers that in a way are those who guarantee the stabilities between the liquid global international relations. So we can speak more for a Cold War, or a new Cold War, and this new Cold War between the superpowers in a way brings also mass surveillance and mass technological advancements that in a way can be solidified with the expression of their superpower.
Thank you.
Clever weapons, smart weapons, new technologies of mass supervision, yes. Yeah, there's a mean of imposing their power, actually.
That's something
Three
we would like
super
to
cycles of
discuss even
superpowers
after
of
the conference.
Yeah,
We
yeah, of course.
discuss this topic because it's very important to me.
But I
so-
think that this is more political and economical and not and philosophical, of course.
Well, philosophy is related,
Yeah.
so I will ask for your opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You listened to the Boris Johnson speech in the UN summit.
But Boris Johnson
Yeah.
represents
Boris-
basically the old superpower. It's no longer,
No, it was related to the topic.
Oh yes. Okay, well, I have one little change to the program. Stavros Panagiotou asked me to present his paper before the coffee break because he has to rush somewhere after the presentation. So I just want to say that without this man, these two, and the third one, which is in the loop, wouldn't happen. So thank you, man.
Yeah.
Both of you, you've been very instrumental in not only in publishing papers with us, but also attracting some interesting scholars. And I hope that you will continue to do what you do because it's very important for the life of this entity. So, without any further ado, I will leave you to it.
Yeah, actually I would try to summarize my thoughts because I have a meeting with my supervisor here in Sofia, and I want to, I think the energy is in the minimum level from all of us, and I will try to summarize my topic. Actually, it's about ethics, Levinasian ethics. Emmanuel Levinas is one of the most prominent ethicists in the 20th century, and the research question of this topic is whether we can speak of God or whether we can react about our perspective about God outside ontotheology and outside ontological aspects. Emmanuel Levinas thinks that it is not too necessary to believe in God, but it is necessary to think of God outside our intentional consciousness about the divine, holy godness. This paper aims at reflecting on the most important aspects concerning Levinas's criticism on ontotheology. In his philosophical works, especially Totality and Infinity, and Otherwise Than Being, Levinas argues that fundamental ontology displays a bias toward cognition and theoretical reason. In this respect, ontology is philosophically inferior to ethics, a field that Levinas construes as encompassing all the practical dealings of human beings with each other. Levinas holds that the primacy of ethics over ontology is justified by the saying and witnessing, two crucial terms which both are being analyzed in this paper. In contrast to classical and analytic tradition, Levinas defends that only the primacy of ethical philosophy can reveal the infinite transcendence of our relation to the other. Furthermore, I argue that, considering ethics as first philosophy, we can speak of God beyond and outside ontotheology, by providing the saying and witnessing as necessary and sufficient conditions to justify this argument. By saying ontotheology, we mean the integration of thinking between beings and God. Ontology, according to Levinas, consists in thinking of God as a being, and in thinking being on the basis of this superior or supreme being. From the exact time that God came to philosophy, we can speak of ontotheology. In ontotheology, word and being are always apprehended and comprehended by thinking. According to Levinas, we cannot regard God or understand the essence of God directly. It is impossible for us to reach or reflect God because He is infinite. Levinas believes in God's existence, but God in Judaism, because Levinas is Jewish, is a transcendence, unknowledgeable for us. We, as finite beings, cannot name, understand, or communicate directly with God. We can communicate with Him indirectly, by the face of the other people. The other person is not a God, but His only trace. And this is the main reason which gives us the right to speak of God beyond ontotheology. Levinas, in his renowned article Ethics as First Philosophy, raises several objections against the traditional classical knowledge, explaining that there are various disadvantages concerning the ontological basis that this methodology stands for. The problem, as he points out, is that the classical notion of, especially of analytic philosophy of knowledge, starts from the immanence. The ideal of rationality begins to appear as the immanence of the real to reason. The problem, Levinas observes, traces from a mistaken approach concerning the freedom of knowledge, which according to classical tradition is essentially the inspiration for the mind, where wisdom of first philosophy is reduced to self-consciousness. It is to be found in the concept of consciousness with the interpretation of the ego cogito sum given by Descartes, something that has been described by Husserl as intentionality. Levinas thus initiates, in contrast to Husserl, not ontological but transcendental phenomenology of the phase where the proximity of the other is the phase as meaning there is a face-to-face steadfast. In contrast to the classical notion of knowledge, Levinas promotes and defends that ethical knowledge lies in the other person, prior to any knowledge. For Levinas, in contrast to Christianity, the other becomes my neighbor not in the same manner as the Christian dictum, love your neighbor as yourself, but through a primordial concern about the other. That is, the other becomes my neighbor precisely through the way the face summons me, calls for me, begs for me, and in so doing recalls my responsibility and calls me to question. Levinasian ethics gives priority not to toxic analytical transcendence toward the other, but toward myself. Levinas is strongly favored to the subversion of phenomenological immanence, turning to the phenomenon of enjoyment, which does not credit self-constituting of the primacy of the same to the other, but the privilege of the other over the self. For Levinas, paradox inscribes the glory of the infinite in the relationship called intersubjective. Hence, Levinas states that we can speak of God escaping onto theology or ontology only and if only the other reveals as a non-thematizable, invisible, equal speaker in our intersubjective self. Levinas also claims that theology's role is not to teach us what God wants, creates and expects. This is not Levinasian philosophical task. According to Emmanuel Levinas, we are not in a position to say truth about transcendence, that is infinity, because we are finite beings and the transcendence does not dwell in the immanence. Levinas himself does not impose on us his religion, but invite us to think with him. The most important issue of Levinas' philosophy is not his faith, but his ethics as first philosophy. However, it is worth citing that in analytic tradition, there is a confusion between philosophical and psychological accounts on what it is to be a person and whether God can be understood by human beings directly by consciousness or self-consciousness. In Levinasian ethics, any psychological or epistemological accounts are omitted. Though Levinas started his philosophical investigations supporting phenomenology and admiring Edmund Husserl and Martin Heidegger, he separated his opinion from them concerning the role of phenomenology and intentionality. For Levinas, phenomenology is not merely a philosophy of representation attached to experience. Phenomenology means attention to that which reveals itself but in the face of the other. He, in fact, does not reveal itself. He bears witness only through the trace, bear witness that he is fact not present, but that he in an immemorial past has passed away. Thus, for Levinas, God cannot be understood through phenomenological ontological conditions, but on contrary, God is transcendence, and as infinite, he has nothing to do with immanence. And the transcendent God nevertheless reveals himself directly. We need to escape ontology even from theology itself to follow God. But why the same is too important for Levinas? The same is more necessary and sufficient condition from the set, since the same must be understood not as a dialogue, but as a bearing witness of the infinite, not to the one whom I open myself, but to all the people. However, it would be a mistake to limit the witnessing by foregoing cognition that leads us yet to another ontotheology. The term saying is not easy to be explained. It is not clear what Levinas exactly means by the saying. It is a metaphysical terminology which aims at exposing oneself without limit. By the phrase, "here I am," Levinas expresses the experience of the self, which is not experience of the we, but it is a matter of a primordial, a priori responsibility prior to any experience and decision. "Here I am" is a phrase that echoes to infinity, standing on an eschatological time beyond and above any ontological, psychological state of the self. The phrase "here I am" therefore appears before any decision and prior to any freedom. It is an a priori responsibility towards only to the other person. According to Levinasian phrase, "here I am" is quite significant in ethics, since it is bear witness to the infinite, without bringing it back to being. In contrast, the set, in the past tense, is something that reveals representation and presence, acquired by way of presuppositions, revealing an ontological God, closing itself and a closed self-unit. To sum up, we can say that Levinas raises some objections on the analytical tradition about God coming up on ontotheology. But finally, what God means for Levinas, and how can we find God through the saying and witnessing in order to empower Levinas' ethical responsibility to the other person? According to Levinas, the answer of this question comes out only if we regard ethics as first philosophy. A very productive and invaluable answer is given below in an excerpt fragment written by Stefan Streiser. In personal conduct, in the ardent care for one's neighbor, in unselfish effort for the other, the holy divine reveals himself. He reveals himself in this way, without becoming the object of intentionality. without becoming the object of the comprehension or being made a theme for a statement. He's unimaginable not because he's too great, too distant, or powerful for imagination, but because he speaks to us from a past that was never actually present for us or even could be actual presence. What matters at all for Levinas is the appearing saying and not the said, because the saying echoes to infinity, to asymmetrical, non-reciprocal responsibility. The infinity of the holy is neither beginning nor end, but anarchy. God as transcendence reveals himself in basic ethical situations and not through ontotheological conditions in the present. As Levinas contends, in our era it is no longer possible to talk of God or to see God in the language of ontology or theology, but always in language of ethics. Thank you.
We have some questions.
Yes.
Very short one.
Yeah.
Anyone?
Yeah, probably afterwards, but yeah.
Okay. I have a question about the face in Levinas. Face in Levinasian philosophy is very important, and I would like to correlate it with Evangelist's paper about basically facial recognition. How Levinasian face matters in the world where everyone is observing you.
Yeah. Actually, this sentence is allegorical. There is not infinite face from Levinas, but what Levinas trying to present in the philosophical community is that what matters is the infinite face through the other, but not in the New Testament that Christianity allege love your neighbor and you make moral goods and it is okay. The face of the other in Levinas is something that it comes from the other to the self. For example, it needs to suffer insight within not ontology in order to present your arguments inside the other. So the other is a priori freedom, and it is not about I decide to make a good deed in order to be okay with the other. But for Levinas, metaphysical conditions are a priori decision and a priori any freedom. What Levinas is trying to say is that we all responsible for the other, but the other trying to seek us and not us for the other people.
So basically, because there's also a notion of, according to Professor Dimitrova, that Levinas is so strong on faith because faith tells you, "Do not kill me."
Yeah.
Yes, that's the thing. So would you think that if Levinas was alive, would he say, "The faith tells me, don't scrutinize me"?
Yeah, actually, because Levinas is Jewish and he spent a lot of decades of his philosophical aspects in order to expert about Talmud and Jewish studies. He isolates one of the 10 commandments of Moses that God give us to us: "Thou shalt not kill." And this is important for Levinas because he tries to isolate the criminal, just legal penalty situations in order to express himself in justice, because one of the most important things nowadays for Levinas is how the other express himself through the justice or through the penalty system and so on. So that's why for Levinas it's very important to understand the other outside of ontotheology and outside of intentionality, and promotes ethics as first philosophy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So our next panelist, he is based in London, and we will see her recorded presentation because she couldn't make it, but she has been present in our debates ever since volume 2 of our journal. Evangelist wrote a paper about recollecting of explaining of the arts and architecture of Artemis Paprakristou. I'm really sorry for my pronunciation. My Greek is nowhere near to be as good as it should be. But I would like to invite you to listen to this and watch to this incredible presentation.
My name is Artemis Papachristou. Hello, my name is Artemis Papachristou. I'm an architect, currently in London. I graduated from the University of Thessaly, Greece, and I'm currently studying a master's called Situated Practice in the Bartlett School of Architecture. I would like to thank the Statu Nascendi for this invitation, and especially Evangelist and Piotr for inviting me, and for giving me actually the opportunity to talk in this way, because things can be sometimes unpredictable, and unfortunately I couldn't attend the conference as much as I would love to be there with you. Yes, and it is interesting because this condition suits with the theme, kind of with the theme of my presentation, in the issue of the illusion of control that architects might have and how things can be unpredictable. So let's start. As you probably have seen, the title of my talk is Architecture is Not or Is an Intellectual Exercise, Transparent Borders and the Homelessness of Architecture. I need to indicate that this title came as an idea after reading an article on Harvard Magazine with the title Design is Not an Intellectual Exercise. The writer, Lady Elaine Gibson, refers to a talk of Teju Cole. I'm not sure if I pronounce his name properly. I'm sorry for this. He's a professor, writer, and art historian. He talks to the Harvard graduate students of architecture and design about oppression, post-colonial situation, and how their work will be influential. In general, it is an interesting talk, and I agreed with him. It is just that this title tickled my thought and made me want to elaborate more of this issue. That's the question of if architecture is an intellectual exercise or not. And as the second part of the title, Transparent Borders and the Homelessness of Architecture, I would say that I thought that being invited in the mostly philosophical conference, that would be a good idea to philosophize, let's say, about what an architect is, and to talk about these blurred boundaries that architecture has always been facing as a field, and that is actually the reason that causes anxiety to architects and causes existential questions around their identity. So I thought it would be nice to express my thoughts on almost like being on the bed of a psychoanalyst, let's say. So, in my opinion, a good architect should always wonder about how the things are made, what are the origins of the things, and in my opinion, an occupation with philosophy is expected, if not necessary, not only before but also during the process of design, and being part of that, actually. And that comes to questions like what exactly are we and what we are doing. As Novalis said, philosophy is really homesickness, the urge to be at home everywhere. And as Heidegger, in his book Building, Dwelling, Thinking, he mentions that it is the nature of human to feel homeless. It's always like to always have the need to seek his home, their home, in a way that they always wonder and contemplate on their existence and habitation on earth. In the same way, I believe that every architect should feel homeless and always question on what architecture is and realize the power that architecture has, like, which is to consist and cover the primary human need, that is the dwelling. So deed happens, and in this case, deed is not the egomaniac architect saying, I did this. Deed is dissociative identity disorder that I believe architects suffer from. It is previously known as a multiple personality disorder. Anyway, so our professors during our studies used to tell us that even architects says that they know what they're doing, they actually are clueless. They have no clue about what is going on and where they're going. And another example is that the contemporary philosopher of science, Anne-Françoise Smith, who teaches also in architecture department and works on the concept of interdisciplinarity, told me in a seminar that I had the chance to take with her that she believes that architecture is a field with which gets involved and overlaps the most with so many other disciplines at the same time. And that is the cause of making us being confused about our role. There's a famous quote by Matthew Frederick, an architect knows something about everything, an engineer knows everything about one thing. You can see that. I mean, I've firstly found this and it was revelating to me when I was reading as a student then 101 Things I Learned in an Architecture School, the book of his. And if also we see the concept, the manifesto of Hans Hollein, Alles ist Architektur, everything is architecture. And a personal example is this image of me being in the Young Artist Biennale in Tirana when I was representing Greece with my work. So this is an image of me there on Facebook, and my professor Jordanis Stilidis is commenting, "You are an artist," and I answer, "I am an artist between architects and an architect between artists." And you know, the same disorientation interestingly happened also when I was accepted to present my work to this exact Biennale, when the curators were wondering if my work should be put in the visual art section or on the applied art section. There was no architectural section, but it was indicated that architecture works were welcome, probably, I would say, parasitically. So we have the pretending architect, a good friend of mine and a philosopher, Valya Golev, continuing the thought of Deleuze and Novalis. He wrote recently in a text he gave me to read that philosophers are pretending to be something else. They pretend to be someone, a politician, a merchant, and never be a direct philosopher. And I believe that this idea can also be applied to architects because of the complexity of their profession. It is more like a fragmented existence. And that is the reason we have we are everywhere, let's say. It is, let's say, expected because of the skills. Actually, it is obvious because the skills and the softwares we are expected to have and know, and that we need to take into consideration many things. But for example, if we compare ourselves to artists, there is a clear difference. The example of comparing art and architecture, it is like really different because both of them are really different because we can say that art can be unapologetic, whereas design always carries responsibility. But if there is one specific, unique thing that architecture does for sure, and that is the power of creating dwelling, to give literally, and maybe at least temporarily, the home and to cover the need of dwelling. architecture gives to the human the opportunity to express materially and creatively the need of dwelling, and to have the space and safe. The safe is the best version, of course, place to contemplate about their existence and about this peculiar condition, about how they inhabit Earth. So architecture has the power to literally create space in order to allow life to unfold. It is a way of world making. Since the beginning of time, we fight our relationship with nature. This is a photo of a storefront in a cosmetic shop in London. And it is interesting because it made me thinking about this relationship. It indicates these peculiar relationships of humans with nature, that they always and actually have the need to be separated by nature in order to survive, but at the same time, we tend to create artificial natures, especially now, and we kind of try to be more natural, in quotation marks. So, yes, this weird situation that we fight, we curate our existence. And this is a way to define our place on earth and on life. So this is the act of dwelling, and it kind of includes and kind of controls this anxiety facing the chaos of this imminence anxiety of facing the chaos of the world and life in general. Design is a mechanism against this chaos and the complexity of life. So having to face this existential question and needs, I believe that architecture is and must be an intellectual exercise. There is always a conflict between theory and practice, but it is a crucial thing to have these questions prior and during the process of design. Also, sometimes architecture can be, let's say, an orgasmic art in a way that what has been built, what has been designed might not be built at the end, but avoiding the built expression does not mean that someone is not practicing architecture. Mario Carpo said that the design professions are now coming to terms with new kinds of digital tools they have adopted. No longer tools for making, but tools for thinking. Architecture in a way of world making is a way of world making, as we said, and acts proactively. It is a representational act, at least in the beginning. It visualizes the current and can comment on the existing condition, but it has the power of world making and shifting and imagining alternatives to the current. We can say that by having this power in mind, we also have the illusion of control. Because in reality, when we design something, when the design is applied in real life, it never acts as we imagined. We need to recognize it, and we need to realize this limit and be okay with it. Actually, architecture is slow. It's slowly responsive to changes. It is actually embedded to existing political and social conditions. But even we have an illusion of control, our works is still influential to the world. So we need to realize that architecture has always been parametric and algorithmic. Humanity is in a constant experimental state, unstoppably creating systems that can act as a whole. We are condemned to fail, and we have to accept this. Architecture, while being embedded to these existing systems and of course having its limits, it has, though, the power to hack and manipulate this existing condition. Architecture is not politics, but can hack politics and politics and rules, and can temporarily shift those and temporarily and topically topically can create different realities. As Pier Vittorio Aureli mentions in his book, The Possibility of an Absolute Architecture, architecture includes the formal and the political, and it has the power to shift these situations by its existence. We can say that it has the power to negotiate through the spatial act. And today we can say that architecture is currently mutated. Every space now overlaps with the digital, and architecture has always been complex, but nowadays it has to handle this new layer of the city, which is the internet. But it must use the digital to become more responsive. It must use this new tool of being fast and use it in order to be more responsive to the current changes, and thus be able to face today's crisis like climate change and talk about current social issues, conflicts between social identities, post-colonialism, and go beyond the service client condition that we now face. After the extreme neoliberal acts, architecture must go beyond, as I said, the service and client condition that we usually see and actually face as projects during, in the current, most of the current studios. We have this service client condition of producing works that apply to the capital and have limited access from the public. Architecture actually needs to question how we live together and rethink the commons. Commons is the new green. We need to rethink what is the public, who is the public, realize that the public is not what is owned by the state, but is what is accessible to the majority, what permits interactions to happen freely. We need to see that the majority of people tend to be users instead of owners nowadays. And actually, I believe that taking also into consideration the ecological crisis, it is better to stop building, not to stop designing, but design less new buildings and start designing new ways of living, manage new protocols and ways of hacking the existing rules. And it is important to create actually a situation that permits new way of occupying spaces and habiting together and live together differently. And that is what I'm currently trained, let's say, to do in my current master's called Situated Practice. I will continue with the opposite of this positive feeling that I just put by showing you this cynical image I created. It was a result of an open call by Malaparte Cafe, which is, I think, a collective and for sure a Instagram page that discusses on current issues that concerns architecture, and they put open calls in order to have a thinking hub around specific theme. And this theme was influencers and architecture. And this was my answer. So this image illustrates, it is a cynical image commenting on a current situation, but also imagining an extreme of the situation. This image illustrates a post-influencers and post-capitalism future. It was made by me after, as I said, the open call. So the scenario and the cynical scenario that I put is this. In the year 2046, influencers, being the richest, are the first one who have the means to colonize Mars, leaving behind the traces of their previous inhabitation. So millions of sample boxes and recording equipment are floating on the post-climate change and post-capitalism flooded earthly landscape. They visit Earth in order to collect fresh, clean water from the desalination plants they have installed, still exploiting what is left. From Earthlings to Martians, they keep a sentimental connection to their origins by having the moon as their temple, where they worship their god, which is YouTube, as you can see, and where they present it to the other creatures of the Milky Way. Of course, this is an extreme scenario, and however, however, it includes current anxieties on our inhabitation on Earth. So I will continue with my diploma project in the University of Thessaly, which was a building proposition, and that of course contradicts my opinion of not designing new buildings, but being a diploma project, it was supposed to be a building proposition. Usually it is a building proposition, and I had the need to do it that way, to be honest. So these were some examples that were worked as an archive on my thinking at that moment. This is an artistic example, The Perfect Humor of Jorgen Lenth in 1967, like purely analyzing and recording mundane, banal acts of inhabitation and everyday life. You can see the screenshots. And another condition that is happening now, and it made me think about contemporary habitation, is the situation of YouTubers, influencers, that they vlog every mundane act of their everyday life, and they record it and they share it on YouTube to their fans for some reason, and they actually are making money out of it. So we have like what we ate videos, sleep vlogging. They record the sleep. We can also remember Andy Warhol's video of sleeping. And another interesting thing is when they do home tours, when they open to the public their personal space, their private houses, and they show what they have and how they inhabit in it. So this is the most characteristic image of my project, and it is called the Museum for Everyday Use. It is a platform of rethinking the term habitus of Pierre Bourdieu. It is a project that, as I said, hacks the everyday and questions and reconsider our contemporary habitation, and acts actually as an experiment of coexistence. It is, it is actually shows the act of inhabit without the habit. All the needs of everyday life, sleep, eating, showering, etc., are approached through the mechanism of art. As I said earlier, architectural design and every curatorial gesture is an illusion of control. Here, this happens in an extreme way. All the household is organized, presented, and named differently, as if it was a work of art in a museum. Each room is designed with a mechanism of art, and it gives an ambiguous and different experience than the usual, and creates an uncanny feeling on the normal way of living. For this reason, some technological devices are used to perform and analyze each action. At the same time, each space is created in a way that every function becomes an exhibit. It is a museum where the visitor becomes a user and at the same time an exhibit himself. It is a place where the distinct animality of the human being is under observation like a science experiment, producing new ways of inhabitation and new ways of coexistence. In this way, the project is an ironic reference and a comment to the way we overshare our lives through social networks. It is an alive archive of inhabitation and of the performativity of everyday life. You can see how it is designed. as I said, or maybe I didn't say it, it is also all underground, and the only part that is in 0 level is this, which I believe it acts architecturally, is the best, let's say, in my opinion, way of showing because it acts, it speaks for itself in a way that it indicates its existence using the transparent, like really famous cubes, cases that we put in the museums in order to have something really precious inside the work of art, which is the work of art. And here each cube, each transparent cube is every separated act that we do at home: sleeping, cooking, having the kitchen table separately, the shower, the toilet, the sink, the fridge, etc. So I think it acts architecturally like an invitation. When this is applied in an urban grid, it indicates, kind of talks about what it negotiates. Like it shows that it exhibits the inhabitation, and it is an invitation to the doors that are on this level to invite you to come inside and see what's happening. Yes, this is the floor plan of the 0 level, as I said. And this is the -1 level that is on the underground. As you can see, and I said, all the household is placed on the walls, and the furniture exhibiting every object like it was in a work of art. And as you can see in the inventory, that every piece has a different name explaining its use, like really stupidly explaining what it does, like naively playing with semiotics, let's say. And some installations. This, for example, is an experiment on sleeping vertically. The fridge that acts as elevator in order to refuel the system with food. For example, this is an installation that the curtain is smaller than the frame, so each time you cover one area, another one is exposed. So this is a play of exhibiting the inhabitation. And this is another installation in the museum that it is an anechoic chamber. That means that it absorbs all of the reflection of sound, the 99.99%. I've copied an specific design that I found in a Californian lab, acoustic lab, where they test some sound systems. And I place mundane acts in it, like what is going on when you're going to eat in it. You're going to listen to yourself eating, actually, because you're going to listen all the internal sounds while you're chewing and while you swallowing, and this is like changes, hacks the act of eating, and at the same time the sleeping. Maybe it's really difficult. I mean, they say that you cannot stay at this room more than some minutes, I think. So it is an experiment to try these acts inside there. Another thing is with RMA, I'm not sure how they are called, the technological devices that can record what is happening on your brain, and outside this is exposed and analyzed. The same way X-rays, if you eat in front of an X-ray screen. And you can see more details in the inventory. The inventory is the catalog that is supposed to be given to the visitors when they arrive to the museum. and it's a catalog of every quote-unquote work of art, which is every installation you can use and what is it called and what is going on there, and all the elements that are like every work of art that you analyze, every material that is constructed with the title of it and a diagram of it. You can find it on my issue with my name and see more details on it. That is from me. If you have any questions, feel free to send me to this email account, and this is my Instagram also. Thank you once again. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And on this basis, I would like to conclude and thank you everyone for their participation. And thank you very much for watching us online. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that.